dedicated to each and every one of you who appreciate a great glass of wine. You know what I mean?
It's Monday. Let's raise a glass to the beginning of another week. It's time to unscrew, uncork, or saber a bottle. And let's begin exploring the wine glass. Today, I am sharing a webinar that I attended from the Bordeaux Wine School. From their webinar description, from summer Fridays to long weekends and grill nights, Bordeaux has a style for every occasion. Did you know that the U.S. is the #1 market for Bordeaux whites? Have you explored the latest Bordeaux Rosés and a full range of reds? There's a Bordeaux for every budget, palate, and customer. Our experts will guide you on the latest trends and fresh ideas to enjoy Bordeaux wines this summer. While you're listening, please take a moment to rate and review Exploring the Wine Glass. Ratings are now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible. Taking 1 minute of your time is the only way the algorithms will suggest Exploring the Wine Glass to others. Slainte. Hey everybody, I'm Lori Budd, a UC Davis winemaking program, someday service, champagne specialist, and WSET Level 2 graduate. You can find Exploring the Wine Glass on all the socials as well as your favorite podcast catchers. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to swipe, subscribe, rate, and review. I promise I'll never tell you what to drink, but I'll always share what's in my glass.
I'm also very excited to introduce Wendy Narby, who's an accredited tutor with the Bordeaux Wine School, as well as author, really great all-around expert of Bordeaux. She's here to lead you through the Q&A if you have questions, so be sure to engage with her. She'll come on at the end of the webinar to ask some questions live, so hopefully you're ready to get all your questions answered from a true expert. Wendy, welcome. How do you like to Bordeaux? How do you like the summer?
Well, I'm
in Bordeaux.
In Bordeaux. Well, I'm actually on the very close to the beach, just to the side of the Medoc. So I'm on the western side of the Medoc, on the beach at the moment. So it's pretty cool. So yeah, feet in the sand, I think, is how I like summer. And yeah, very excited to answer your questions. So if you've got any questions at all, please type them. I'll keep an eye on them. And then I'll answer what I can. What I can't answer, we'll put to the panel at the end of the session. So looking forward to that.
And then without delay, I will put you in the hands of Mary Gorman McAdams, Master of Wine, to introduce our panel and also tell us about your favorite summer moments.
Thank you very much, Shelley. Hi, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here again and talk about Bordeaux, my favorite thing to do. So how do I like to summer? Well, in the city, one of my, I guess, favorite things that I learned to enjoy was going out to Randall's Island, where we used to watch our son playing soccer and bring a nice bottle of wine and sit by the water and just watch the sun go down. My little idea of an island off an island, just off Manhattan. So anyway, I am really delighted to introduce our two wonderful panelists. With us today, we have fellow Master of Wine, Christy Canterbury. And Christy has worked across all aspects of the trade. So she is bringing to us a lot of experience and insights in terms of summering in the US and how we can make it a Bordeaux summer. So Christy, just if you'd like to introduce yourself briefly and tell us how you like to summer.
Thanks for having me, Mary, fellow Master Wine Study partner. It's always good to see you, even though we mostly see each other on the screen these days instead of in person to study. How do I like to summer with Bordeaux? I definitely skew to the white wines a lot. I think like so many people, I've started eating a lot lighter, more veggies, and I just think about summer green markets, picking up all that fresh produce there and cooking with that. And so I tend to drink a lot of the Bordeaux whites. And if it's really miserable, like it was yesterday, I'll drink them inside. But what I really like to do in the summer is drink them out on the balcony, where we overlook the communal terrace with its pretty flowers, and we're kind of like enclosed, so we don't hear any city noise. So it kind of feels like we have this big private garden right off of our terrace.
Fabulous. Never underestimate the New York City balcony or even fire escape for an escape.
Space is always key.
So also with us is Jean-Jacques Dubourdieu, whom I'm sure many of you tuning in have seen many times. Jean-Jacques makes all styles of wine in Bordeaux across many properties. So Jean-Jacques, you're very welcome, and tell us how you liked the summer.
Hello, Mary. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar. So actually, we have a nice summer starting here in Bordeaux. It's quite warm. We are around 36 Celsius. So during the week when I work in the vineyard, I have one thing I like is going to swim in the cold water of the Ciron River, which is just in the middle of the estate, actually. So it's a lot better than any other swimming pool. A bit fresh, but by this time it's just perfect. In our region, we also have the chance to have the sea not too far, the Bassin d'Arcachon, and some oysters with a good white Bordeaux, for example, is also a good way to cross the summer.
Of course, I think we're all wishing that we were actually in Bordeaux for most of the summer. So we're here today to talk about how you can make it a Bordeaux summer, and sort of what's driving that is that oftentimes when people think about enjoying or opening Bordeaux, it's sort of as towards the end of the summer, the fall, getting into sort of the shorter, sort of colder days. But we want to talk about the wines because there's a lot of the wines that are really perfect for enjoying through the summer, not just the whites, but rosés and many of the reds. So that's probably something that people don't necessarily think so much about, Bordeaux when you're thinking about sort of summer reds. So we're going to look from the market perspective and also the production perspective as to how come Bordeaux is making all these wonderful wines. So this is, I think, it sort of sums it up sort of nice and succinctly that yes, Bordeaux mostly makes red wine, but it's a lot of wine. So there's also rosé and its own unique wine, Claret, which is a slightly darker rosé, very underestimated, and something that's certainly very suitable for how we live today. We're also going to look at the dry whites, the diversity and versatility of these whites, and also the sweet wines. I think I was doing some work yesterday with the sweet wines, and the big message is get them off the dessert list, get them out of the sweet wine section, and really experiment with these wines with all sorts of wonderful foods. And then our little sparkling at the end. Who knew that now 1% of all wine produced in Bordeaux is sparkling? So it has its own Cremant de Bordeaux. So again, fabulous wines to enjoy over the summer. So what we want to kind of look is sort of drill down more deeply into these styles, because it's very easy to say we've white, we've rosé, we've sparkling. But what are these styles really like, and what's sort of driving the production of them? What's really interesting over the last sort of decade or more is to see the development and increase in the production of what we call sort of fruity, expressive reds. And you can really see it when you sort of taste the wines and also talk to the wine growers, how there's less influence of oak on these wines. And these wines are wines that are just juicy, delicious, and ready to drink once they're released. But they do have the Bordeaux DNA. They can still, age in your cellar if you'd like that. We have the dry whites, which are just perfection in the glass in my book, just fabulously lively and bright. And there's a whole diversity of styles, which we'll talk a little bit later. So I think in many ways it's never been more exciting. The sweet wines, we are definitely going to talk a little bit more about those, and also the Cremants and Rosés. But first, I want to, Christy, sort of bring you in and talk about. From your perspective, what do you think is driving the demand for what we call these sort of lighter, brighter, fresher styles of wines?
Well, I definitely think there are a couple of things. One is that we are starting to kind of eat lighter. We are thinking more about having our veggies, as Mom always told us to. So I think that definitely helps to kind of move us in the direction of kind of lighter, brighter styles of wine. So that's certainly one thing. I think that we are also drinking wine on many more occasions. It's not just for special times. It's becoming more and more of a day-to-day must-have. It's becoming more of a grocery as opposed to just something for a special occasion. And those are two very important things. And also, I think that we're kind of starting to go a little bit more outside of our typical boundaries. We're looking at, not just, whatever we always drink. It's not just, XYZ, Chardonnay or what have you. We're looking at lots of different kinds of wines. And so that's driving, and then that gets us excited. And then we go back and purchase more wines, and that kind of just feeds on itself. So a couple of different things.
Okay, and yeah, I think what you mentioned there, the way we sort of eat and live today, that we like fresher styles, and red fits into that as well. Jean-Jacques, could you talk a little bit about from your end as a wine producer, what do you think is driving the increased production and focus on these styles of wines by you, in your properties, and also your peers, your fellow winemakers across Bordeaux?
Yeah, we are not that typical in the Bordeaux field, because in our 6 different family estates we make 50% of white, dry and sweet. So I don't think we are really representative in term of Bordeaux production, but at least what I can say is the dry white market is very dynamic, as long as we provide something to the market. Actually, I wouldn't say in our estate that we adapt ourselves to the market, but at least we try to bring something, to bring a flavor, to bring a special taste. I think, for example, when we sell Chateau Renon Blanc in the United States, it's because this Sauvignon Blanc is a lot more different than Californian Sauvignon Blanc or New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. So I think as long as we bring identity, even if it's not exactly the style that people is looking for, actually, people love to be surprised. And I always prefer a consumer saying that he doesn't like my wine because it's not exactly its style, than someone saying, oh yeah, I don't even remember if I had your wine. I don't know. I didn't have any emotion. And I think it's a main problem as a wine producer is not bringing emotion when you make wine. And it means you are not bringing anything, because a winemaker is and a wine grower and an estate, and the concept itself of winery is to explain to the consumer that here the wine has another taste than there. So I think in my family we make wine, we make dry white for a while. I think my grandfather started the first vintage of Doisiden dry white in 1948, and now it's more or less the 70th birthday of Doisiden dry. This wine is doing very well all over the world. I'm not saying it's the best wine ever, but what I'm saying, it's 100% Sauvignon Blanc on the Barsac limestone brings something different. And even if some people doesn't like exactly that style of Sauvignon Blanc, quite crispy and sharp, at least they recognize the style, and at least as a winemaker, we exist in a category. So I think it's it's our vision as a winemaker, but it's also of course different than a consumer vision, but I mean, at least it's what we feel from the production we make.
I would think that a lot of wine consumers would, I guess, share your view. I was talking to some people yesterday who said to me, I don't like Sauvignon Blanc unless it comes from Bordeaux. So that was something very nice to hear. But something else, just kind of going back in terms of what's driving it, in various conversations, over the last few years with your fellow winemakers in Bordeaux, I've heard, it's kind of anecdotal, but I think it sort of, hits home. People saying that they're making these brighter, fresher styles because if nobody buys our wine, I want to be able to drink it myself, and I'm making wine that I want to drink, that I can enjoy, with my family, with my friends, and with my food. So I think it's fair and squarely. It's something that people want to enjoy. They want to not so much collect these wines, but to make wines that you can enjoy with food, with friends, in a variety of settings. So I think that really sort of supports what you were talking about, Christy. The way we our lifestyle. We eat more likely, and we have this sort of keener interest in what's going on in the environment. But let's talk specifically about bringing it back to Bordeaux in the US in the summer. And Chris, you mentioned about the expanded consumption occasions that you're seeing. Can you talk a little bit about, when we've sort of thrown a few key dates here on a slide, but can you talk a little bit more how you see wine, and particularly Bordeaux wine, sort of fitting into some of these key holidays in the summer?
Yes, and I will say that obviously I like to cheat and bring in other occasions like Fêtes de la Musique, over the summer solstice. The Tour de France is coming up. That's a great reason to have a glass of wine at night when you're maybe catching up on what happened during the day. Bastille Day. All of those are very fair game for popping open a bottle of wine. And we don't have a lot of the sparkling wines that came onto Bordeaux, but those are obviously perfect for any sort of celebratory occasion, especially so many of us are just getting back to being together and having parties and going and sitting in the park to listen to a concert, that sort of thing, or watch a movie in the park. Those are all great moments for a nice bottle of something sparkling. And of course, rosé. And we know that rosé is off the charts in popularity. While rosé should be year round, it's really a mainstay of summer for so many people. And you were talking about the different, kind of the different styles of rosé before, and I really like to start kind of with the paler colors of pink rosé that you can find in Bordeaux, and then bring it all the way into claret as you maybe move to dinner or move on to maybe a heavier food course or something. So that's also a great way to kind of extend a Bordeaux experience throughout a meal and stay pink at the same time. Obviously, grilling foods, all those things that we do in summer. And you were talking earlier about the fresher, brighter styles, the Bordeaux reds, and so many of the the satellite appellations, even Medoc. So many of them are Merlot dominant, and so they're just so friendly because they have kind of that plush mid palate. There's the kind of still that Bordeaux earthiness, cedary note that really goes nicely with something that's grilled. And they have very svelte tannin, so really easy to drink with whatever you're having with your barbecued meats off the grill. They're not overly oaky, and they're not just really easy to drink.
Yeah, can I go back to actually quite a number of the things that you mentioned there, Christy? Well, actually, first I would like to go to Jean-Jacques, and we talked about how here in the US, the opportunity to enjoy wine, the consumption occasions just keeps getting greater and greater, and every day is a wine day from somewhere or some style. Can you talk a little bit about, back home in Bordeaux? Are you also seeing sort of expanded consumer consumption occasions, happening in terms of, you and your friends and your family?
Yeah, I think there is in France in the consumption there is something very seasonal. So people, as long as spring is here and summer, of course, people is drinking sometimes quite only white, actually. And when winter is arriving around the fireplace, people only want red. I mean, it's a little bit less white than before, but it still is, honestly. And then some people here in Bordeaux, from June, they only drink dry white and rosé, which is nice for us. But we feel at the worldwide scale, with all the customer and the importer we have all over the world, that the tendency of consumption of white is increasing more than the red. That is for sure. So what we feel here, I don't know if it's representing something, but we feel at the worldwide scale that white is booming, even if in Bordeaux it's not really booming. I mean, it's quite stable in proportion. The level of quality is increasing, definitely, because Bordeaux won't be the best place to produce the industrial low-cost dry white. I mean, this is not our playground. We don't have enough advantage. First of all, in terms of cost, in terms of weather. I mean, it won't be the place. But for medium and premium, Bordeaux is a perfect place. You can have diversity between Entre-deux-Mers, between Graves, between Pessac-Léognan, between the dry white from Sauternes and Barsac around the Ciron Valley. It's a world, actually. It's a world of diversity. And yeah, definitely we feel that more and more people is interested. For example, I had a client in the United States who asked me specifically a dry white made from the Sauternes-Barsac region. So it's kind of new. And as a producer, we feel it, quite recent.
Well, I'm going to come back to that in a moment, Jean-Jacques, because we are going to dedicate quite a little bit to our dry whites. But first, Shelley, thank you for launching our poll. So hopefully all our viewers will submit their answer. So, what percentage of Bordeaux wines sold in the United States retail are less than $20? What do you think? How are we doing, Shelley?
Overall, they got the right answer.
Fabulous. So all the webinars that the Bordeaux Wine School has been doing over the last 2 years are paying off. So yes, I mean, that's something that I think, even if we know it as a fact, I still think that we have some work to do in terms of, when you go out to a store to buy a bottle of wine, you still probably, I think there's a legacy of thinking, well, I can't really afford Bordeaux. But to follow on from what Jean-Jacques was talking about, I'd like to talk a little bit in more detail about this diversity of white wine. And we've sort of broken it into this sort of tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And partly because I think historically, the dry whites of Bordeaux have often been sort of bookended, either the great famous age-worthy complex wines of Pessac-Léognan, or the cheap and cheerful, very sort of entry-level wines and fruity wines. But there's a whole world to discover, in that sort of middle tier as well. And not say, I mean, tier 1 is fabulous. There are wines I would drink on a nightly basis, and there's nothing nicer than having some seafood, or just sitting out in your garden with a bottle of Entre-deux-Mers wine or AOC Bordeaux, and these wines are $10 to $20. So I think for any of you who are either selling these wines or thinking of buying these wines, I think today they offer tremendous value for somebody who is looking for something fresh, bright, clean, and crisp to enjoy, and often because you have that Semillon in the blend as well as Sauvignon, the wines can also appeal to that, small proportion of people who say, I don't really like a Sauvignon Blanc because it sort of tempers the, I guess, the boldness of a pure Sauvignon Blanc wine. But then when you're in Bordeaux, that pure Sauvignon Blanc wine, as Jean-Jacques mentioned, has that sort of slightly riper stone fruit character, and is really very quite delicious and textural. Christy, can I bring you in here just to talk a little bit about, because I know you are a lover of dry white Bordeaux and drink it a lot. So could you talk a little bit about some of the wines that you've been enjoying and why you've been enjoying them, and what you like about them across these tiers?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge fan, especially when I drink at home, especially in the tier 2s and tier 3s, because you do get the complexity of blends oftentimes in there. You get maybe sometimes a little bit of, a nuttiness or a toastiness, maybe from a little bit of a little new oak, or maybe some older oak or larger oak, that also gives that textural dimension that you were mentioning, Mary. And I love texture, especially in wine. And I think it really helps to communicate with food, and especially when you're cooking your food, like cooked vegetables and fish and things. I do tend to like the tier 1 very much with things that are not cooked. So things that are like salads or fresh salads now, or maybe I'm looking at the picture, obviously the oysters in front of us, or maybe some sushi. I tend to drink a lot of those wines because they're very they're fresh, they're clean, they're about food, they're straightforward. And then I get, something that's kind of very fresh and clean and that lets the food speak on its own, and they don't interact. And I shouldn't say they interact, they definitely interact, but they don't clash together. So I love the tier 2s and tier 3s, and the value is absolutely amazing. I mean, I think, you have to get kind of almost above tier 3 pricing right now. If you look at some of France's other famous regions, even Sancerre is often kind of at the higher end of that tier 3 for their basic wines. Bourgogne Blanc is definitely at the high end of that tier 3. And here you have the best wines, best white wines in Bordeaux. I think that the value just absolutely cannot be beat, really, in France overall, when you look at dry white Bordeaux.
And I think going back to something that I wholeheartedly, Christy, I think it's, we always keep saying it's our little secret, these fabulous wines. Well, we want more people to buy them. But Jean-Jacques, going back to what you were talking about earlier, about Bordeaux and the dry white, and you're not competing at that sort of very entry level. And I think it's something really important to point out about these wines. I shouldn't say even, and particularly, at the tier 1, these wines still have one foot in the terroir. And I think that's something that really differentiates these wines, these summer wines made in Bordeaux. They're bright, they're fruity, they're fresh, but they absolutely retain their DNA of terroir. And I think that's what makes them gastronomic, that no matter how fruity they are, they still have this fabulous salinity and sense of being from somewhere that makes them really really super to pair with food, as well as just sort of sitting back on your porch and enjoying the wines. And Jean-Jacques, you mentioned too about people looking now for a dry white from Barsac or the Sauternes area. And I think it's important to sort of point out to all our viewers is that dry white wines today are being made all over Bordeaux. So you have fabulous diversity of terroir and even sort of, difference in sort of microclimates, where you get this lovely range of aromas and flavors and ripeness levels. And I think it's at these price points, it's hopefully it encourages people to experiment, and try these wines. And at worst, you're down, $15. But yeah, so Jean-Jacques, you make a lot of white wine, and you were talking about your dry white in Noisy-Den, but across the range, Grave, you have your dry white Bordeaux Blanc. So are you seeing also in Bordeaux this increased production across the region? And often regions that traditionally make red wine also making dry whites.
Actually, as I told you before, we feel for the moment the the proportion quite stable. But if you consider the historic actors of dry white or the strong label, I would say, this part is increasing. I think the white production is specializing itself right now. And those who are well known as a signature of white are quite growing, actually. But the dry white category overall is for the moment stable. But I think it will increase because of what we consider before. At a worldwide scale, people is drinking more and more white. Also, we are more and more sensitive to all the spring frost aspect. I mean, the dry white is even more sensitive than the red. So in a way, it's more fragile. So the from a side, the consumption is increasing, and from another side, it's more and more difficult to produce white. And also, a very warm summer is also an issue for the dry white production. So I think in some places Bordeaux could plant some more white, especially on some north exposure, in some deep clay, or in the very few limestone places we have, because actually we have few limestone in Bordeaux, but actually there is some area of limestone isolated. There is some in Entre-deux-Mers, there is some in Graves, there is some even in Médoc. So in all this little mosaic, it's possible to make a great white with a nice identity, with a nice diversity, and as long as the wine counts a story, it's working. It's always working, because we always find a community all over the world who likes this identity, and it's really what we feel. So sometimes as a producer, you always wonder if you have to paste to the market or to present a very unique style, and actually it's a dilemma. It's a question that every producer can ask himself. But what we feel in our specific production is what is working better is to propose a strong identity, where it's always better than trying to paste to a market which is anyway moving all the time.
Well, I think Bordeaux and Bordeaux White is doing quite well, and I think maybe our viewers know, or maybe they don't, that the United States is the #1 export market for Bordeaux's dry whites. So thank you all of you who are tuning in, who have made that possible, and hopefully will continue to do so. Just before we move on, because we've got to talk about our reds as well, but I think it's just important to sort of remind people because of the varieties. We've got Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, Muscadelle, and Sauvignon Gris. So with this fantastic palette of grape varieties, it really enables the producers to create these wonderful, blends and this diversity of styles, as well as you often see the increasing production of varietal wines from these varieties as well. So plenty to choose from, fantastic price points, and really wines that go with everything, all the way from just sipping outside to, a wonderful complex meal. Okay, so let us now talk about the refreshing modern reds. And Christy, I'm going to start with you. Could you talk a little bit about, we have some sort of points here on the slide, but could you talk a little bit behind those as to, why they're refreshing, why they're modern, and why we should be enjoying them, and how we can enjoy them?
Yeah, absolutely. There's such a great line of acidity in all these wines, because these are, French wines made for food, made for the table. And so there's always a great underlying freshness in them. And of course, there's Mary was just talking about the red grape variety, the white grape varieties, but red, we've got, of course, Cabernet Sauvignon, but I mentioned Merlot before, which can be, soft and round and lush. But we also have Cabernet Franc, which is so beautiful. It's very aromatic, and it's a great provider of acidity for wines that are kind of easy to drink and very summer ready. A lot of these wines that are super easy to drink, ready to drink young, ready to drink when they're released. We're seeing lots of 19s in the market in the US, quite a few 18s are here. They're ready to go. These aren't wines that need to be, tucked away under in the closet or under the mattress in New York City or in your cellar if you have more space somewhere. But they're ready to drink now. They don't have a lot of oak. They're really about pure, fresh fruit, and that's all that you need to pop the cork on them. As I mentioned before as well, a lot of them really are dominated by Merlot. So Merlot tends to have kind of cuddly tannins, makes them wines very easy to drink very early on, also these wines can if you think about wines that you want to drink in summer, something that's kind of, light, easy, maybe something red from the Loire or a Beaujolais. These are great wines to switch in and out with those wines, especially if you're catching on to that trend of, chillable reds, which, at least cellar temperature, but maybe even a little bit cooler than cellar temperature wines that are great for picnics, for drinking outdoors when it's warm, for taking on a hike with your sausage or saucisson and cheese, that sort of thing. All of these make the wine super easy to drink, and also, of course, they're very approachable for your pocketbook.
Absolutely. And I think what you say about the Cabernet Franc, and it's not like Bordeaux is going to change and all the reds are going to be Cabernet Franc 100%, but just that little bit of Cabernet Franc in the blend, really adds that sort of light, bright perfume and additional freshness to the wine. But at the same time, to your point about Merlot, I say regularly that I think Bordeaux gives Merlot a real reason for living, and I think don't ever sort of underestimate the those cool, deep clay soils that really retain the freshness in Merlot, and there's plenty of those deep clay soils around Bordeaux, and I think it's sometimes we underestimate how wonderful Merlot can be, and to your point, Christy, about the less oak and chillable, there really is a trend to, and what I'm seeing, I'm not making wine in Bordeaux, but I talk to a lot of people who make wine in Bordeaux, and what I'm hearing is sort of like less extraction and more about preserving the purity of fruit expression that comes in from the vineyard, and then not sort of masking that with oak. And I think that's what you're tasting, Christy, when you're tasting these young, very bright, fresh wines.
Yep. And can I just pop in there too, because we didn't talk about the second label wines, and I'm just looking at the slide, of course, now, and I'm like, oh gosh, I've been drinking a lot of the second label wines from all over recently, which are, of course, meant to be drunk a little younger. Some of them can be aged, but most of them are really ready to drink, now while you're waiting for the Grand Vin, the big wines to come around. But it's also really interesting. I've been drinking a lot of the 2017s lately, and they're just a much lighter style of vintage, and they're absolutely positively fantastic and super gently priced, even for some of the higher end second label wines. They're really delightful. Not necessarily always chillable, but definitely cellar temperature wines, and just some really brilliant 2017 second labels. I'm so excited that I randomly bought a couple of them about 6 months ago, and I have been buying more since. Just absolutely loving those.
That's a really important point, Christy, is, not to fear, vintages that are not lauded as the greatest sort of collector vintages, because if that's all I bought, I'd be dead before I'd get to enjoy them. So, you've got these lovely sort of classic vintages where the wines are just beautifully fresh. But there's so many of the appellations across Bordeaux where today you just find these fabulous, fresh, bright just juicy wines, and I say Merlot dominant with some Cabernet Franc as well. So we want to talk a little bit as well about, we mentioned earlier the rosé, the sweet and the sparkling, and I think for a lot of wine consumers here, they probably haven't had that much experience with these styles of wines. So hopefully, we are seeing more come into the market, and hopefully we will continue to see more and more come into the market. That, rosé is certainly, a style that continues to be in demand. And, I think that, Bordeaux is playing in that rosé field as well. But I want to talk to you both about this, because I see that, the rosé market it's a very competitive market, and you can't really come in and be just another sort of rosé producer. But Christy, I'll start with you maybe. What do you see in terms of rosés from Bordeaux? How do you think they can or should differentiate themselves and position themselves on the market?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the first point is probably the most important, because we want to talk about the second point, which is that color range, which can be quite wide in Bordeaux. And you do see kind of that super pale, kind of baby girl pink rosé coming out of Bordeaux, but you'd often see the wines with a little bit more color. I mean, the grape varieties, Merlot, Cabernet, this isn't, Grenache that's meant to be, super pale necessarily. These are wines that have more color to them. But regardless of what the range of color is, if it's a Bordeaux rosé, it is bone dry.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Exploring the Wine Glass is brought to you by Dracaena Wines. Dracaena Wines is an artisan winery located in Paso Robles, California. They have been producing wine since 2013. Their first vintage began with one wine, their classic Cabernet Franc, which received a 91 in Wine Enthusiast. Since then, they have increased production as well as expanded their portfolio, have received many accolades including multiple double gold medals and consistent 90-plus ratings. Visit their website www.dracaenawines.com or use the link in the show notes to schedule a private tasting and to see their entire portfolio. Purchase your award-winning wine and let Dracaena Wines help turn your moments into great memories.
And I find that a lot of the Bordeaux rosés tend to have a little bit more structure. They are, whether it's more color, more structure, there's just more, there's more firmness to them. They're definitely, I think, wines that are really still made for the table, as opposed to sipping, on the balcony. And absolutely, they're great for that too. But I think they're very much gastronomic rosés. And they're also rosés that can take some food with personality. They don't have to be just with, delicate seafood or a salad or something. They can take something off the grill because they do have that more, that structure, more concentration, and a little bit more of a depth of flavor with the blends.
And I think you see here too, in the market, that the market for rosé is segmenting. There's opportunities for higher end rosés, gastronomic rosés, even rosés that have some oak aging. So I do think that for Bordeaux coming into the market, not just being sort of a very simple fruity pale rosé can be a good thing. And really have those dry terroir-driven wines. Jean-Jacques, you've made some rosé. You have the Clos Floriden rosé. I remember enjoying many times. Can you talk a little bit from your perspective as a producer of rosé, what you see in terms of what you want to produce and feel the market is looking for?
Actually, we try to make the rosé exactly like we make the dry white, so no rosé de saignée, no blood rosé. It's a direct pressed. Actually, we have all the chain, all the machinery to vinify excellent rosé with a pneumatic press under nitrogen. I mean, we have everything to make a very aromatic rosé, especially with some very good Cabernet. So actually, we are quite. Even if for us it's staying a niche market, But as long as we try to count a new story around a very aromatic and fresh rosé. We love pressed rosé because there is less alcohol, higher acidity, it's fruitier. So now the main thing is how to give value to this. And little by little, there is more and more demand. And the difficulty when you are a wine producer is you always have to make a little bit less wine than what you are able to sell. So that's why we are going quite slowly because it's a lot of investment, and we don't want to produce something that we are not able to sell. But we have to say that a good rosé made like that, so a good Cabernet Sauvignon rosé on some cold places, vinified like a dry white, in a fancy bottle, of course, because I mean rosé belongs to a special market with a special code. It's working quite well. So it's not it won't be, I think, a huge market for us, not like the dry white, but I have to say that it's growing. So, I mean, we consider it seriously.
Thank you. Yeah, no, so I think it is growing, and I certainly hope to see more examples here. Just before we launch into talking about a trade survey that we conducted recently, I just wanted to take a little bit about time about our créments and the sweet wines of Bordeaux. Maybe some of you know, and maybe some of you don't, that Bordeaux makes a crément, a sparkling wine traditional method. And you know, these wines, there's not too many of them in the market yet, but I think they're increasing. They typically are made as a white wine or a rosé wine with Semillon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc. And actually, I tasted one yesterday that had 20% Uni Blanc, which was actually really delicious and really, added an interesting backbone of acidity to the wine. And then the sweet wines, there's a lot more going on in Bordeaux than Sauternes and Barsac, which are the legendary, fantastic sweet wines, and obviously Jean-Jacques, that's part of your DNA. But there are many more areas and appellations, and particularly along the right bank of the Garonne, appellations like Lupiac, Cadillac, Saint-Croix-du-Mont, which offer tremendous, not just value, but also these wines are ready to enjoy much earlier, and they're brighter, fresher. And I think there's a whole opportunity in the summer to enjoy and share these wines with fried chicken, some barbecue. So I'll start with you, Christy, and I know we don't have that much time left, but maybe taking the sparkling and the sweet wines. Could you talk a little bit about what you see from a kind of a summer wine perspective using these two styles of wines?
Yeah, I think that the créments have a gravitas. The Créments de Bordeaux have a gravitas, and I think especially with the Merlot, Cabernet Franc, they have a little more weight to them than some of the say Créments d'Alsace or Créments de Bourgogne, and I think that's great for the summer barbecue, the summer foods that have just a little bit more heft to them. So I'm a big fan of them for that reason. And I also think that when you do find them, which is not very often right now, we're going to change that.
Any importers there, look for them.
Yes, please, we want them. But they often are more reasonably priced even than créments from other parts of France. I think they're extremely gentle on the wallet. And then white sweet Bordeaux, I really love the ideas with kind of the brighter, fruitier styles of the Thai food. And I'm just thinking of like the Thai salads that just have, that have bursts of flavors. I love the idea of pairing those kind of medium sweet wines. And it is important to mention, these aren't necessarily as sweet as Sauternes. You're kind of looking at Wine Geek Alert is talking about residual sugar, but kind of more in the 40 to 80 grams per liter of residual sugar. So, and of course, palates have plenty of acidity, but they're not as unctuous necessarily as Sauternes and Barsac. But my favorite way to serve sweet white Bordeaux is always at the beginning of a meal, because when people come over, well, we start with something, bubbly to begin with for sure. But then when we move to the table, I like to do something sweet because no one will say no. They might at the end of a dinner say, oh, I'm just finishing my red, or I have too much, I've had plenty, or oh, I have to drive, or whatever. At the beginning of the meal, they never say no. And everyone loves sweet wine. Whether they want to admit it or not, everyone loves them. And it's a great way to remind people that they should be drinking sweet wine, and they never refuse. So that is my little tip.
I think that's a really valid point. Start with the wines. I remember our fellow wine professional, Jeff Harding, director at the Waverley, and hosting a dinner one evening. And we started out with a second label of a Sauterne wine, so a nice young wine, we all had a packet of Lay's salt and vinegar chips. And it was just fabulous. I mean, anyone could do it. And it was just a perfect way to turn everything on its head. And we started with the sweet wine. So and I think what you said is really important, that these wines are not as sweet. So ranging from, sort of the 40s up to about, 80 or 90 grams compared to, the richer Sauterne Barsac wines, which not to take from them, they're fantastic wines, but for something that's lighter and sort of easier drinking. So I think we should move on to we did a survey, and Christy, you've been sort of looking at that, and we all have. Can you talk a little bit about what our peers are telling us across the country about what they're seeking out and what their criteria for summer wines?
Yes, well, no surprise. Rosé is certainly very popular. But it was quite interesting that some wholesalers were saying that dry whites are really going to run dry this summer, because they're going to be so popular. Obviously, value is always a play with everyone, especially now that we're going back out and dining in restaurants as well. A couple of things that people are talking about in terms of what they want to sell. People want a good story. And one of the things that we know about Bordeaux is that we have lots of very small producers, family producers, going back generations and generations. We also have lots of kind of young up-and-comers. We get some young guns on the scene. So there's definitely always a way to sell. Got to answer my survey here to sell the story here. We've been talking about food pairings, and of course, whether you're in a restaurant or buying a wine at a store, almost everyone that we surveyed said, we need to know how to pair the wine with food. So just knowing in general that Bordeaux there's lots of Atlantic influence, the influence of the rivers, and there's plenty of freshness in Bordeaux wines. They're definitely wines that are made for the table, as you would expect from any European wine, and certainly a French wine. So those are two kind of unexpected criteria. But what we're seeing more and more for the people that are buying the wines to resell to consumers who aren't quite demanding it as much just yet is sustainability. Is this wine made from organic grapes? Is this wine made by people who are paying attention to whatever, maybe their carbon footprint or other actions that we need to be taking to think about our green earth and try to keep it greener. Some other concerns that people have over the summer are going to be obviously supply chain. It is the two words of the year, maybe along with inflation. But also people are concerned about staffing shortages. But I think that Mary and Jean-Jacques can tell everyone there's going to be no supply shortage of Bordeaux wines this year, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I mean, the good thing is Bordeaux does make a lot of wine, and I think, as we saw from the first poll, is that over 70% of the wines sold here sell for under $20. So I think that survey response about value being key. Also, you talked about the concern for the environment, and I think we've seen over the last 20 years the enormous strides that Bordeaux has made in terms of sustainability, and today that the area of the Gironde is the fastest growing in terms of either organic or in conversion to organic. So there's enormous amount going on there, and And then the other point I think that came out from the survey was the story, the family, and as we see it in person with Jean-Jacques, and most of the wine estates in Bordeaux are family owned, not just family owned, but family worked as well. So there is that story, there is the generational aspect, and also to your point, the young people who've sort of moved into some of the, I guess, affordable areas of Bordeaux to start making wine. So it's almost like that demand from the survey is made for that palette of wines coming out of Bordeaux. Jean-Jacques, is there anything that you would like to, have you kind of noticed from the survey, or anything that you'd like to comment on in terms of what the trade is saying?
Yeah, I didn't realize that, we know that value in France, we know that the value is a big issue, because in France, a significant part of the wine sales are under 10 euro. Actually, we are in also a country where we produce wine, so it's normal in a way. But I see that in a state it's also a big issue. Environment is an issue which is normal. But actually here in Bordeaux we realized that a lot of people were doing a lot of things actually for years. Yeah. But now we learned how to communicate about that. For example, my family has a bee house in the middle of the vineyard for 1 century. We never communicate about that. Now, yeah, we do, because we feel that the consumer, the importer, the wine professional need to understand what is your impact on the environment and what we do. And I think it's even wider than a certification, because there is many certification. We have a lot of certification, and then even I won't even precise which one. But I think we need to be very cautious, because we feel that the consumer is also feeling all the certification as a kind of greenwashing. And what he wants to feel when he has an experience in the winery, when he checks the website, when he drink the wine, he wants to feel the impact on the environment, what we do in a long-term view. And I feel it more and more important. And for example, all the certification now, we feel it when we host people in the winery. Actually, they don't really care about certification. They want we talk about our energy production, about our CO2 emission, about the forest we plant, about the renovation of the old house of our village, about the fact that we create employment locally, and I think a winery has to communicate a lot also on all these aspects, because it's a very long-term aspect, and the consumer is more and more concerned by that. Otherwise, a certification is another certification above another one, and I think we really have to count the story, and we have a nice story. Every winery everywhere in the world has a nice story, because we have land, we have forest, we have a roof with a solar panel. We can retreat all the water we consume. We can even be completely independent in terms of energy, of water, of fertilizer. Every winery in the world, and there is always a very nice scenario to count. We always had, actually, but now we feel that consumers want to listen to this scenario. Maybe 10 years or 15 years ago, not that much. Now it's really important. So
I think that's what you said is so true, and certainly my observations over the decades sort of going to Bordeaux is that lots going on, but nobody's really kind of talking about it or telling people what you're doing. And I think to your other point, there's a much more holistic approach and view to the long-term viability, the kind of the regenerative ecology, agroforestry approach. So I think that sort of fits in with what I guess the industry is looking for. I know we're sort of coming up at the top of the hour, and I just want to sort of, I guess, collate our takeaways. I think hopefully that those of you who are sort of watching with us today now kind of see, I should consider Bordeaux as my summer wine and look across the styles, certainly the diversity of styles and the affordability. And I think we've talked a lot about how, the many occasions we can use these wonderful wines. But I know we probably have some questions. So I am going to hand you over to the wonderful Wendy Narby, who is going to take our Q&A. Thank you, Wendy.
Pleasure. Well, there aren't many questions because I think you've answered them all with everything you're talking about. But one question came up was about Claret. So you talked quite a lot about Rosé, and if you can just touch a little bit on Claret, the difference between Claret and Rosé, and can we find Claret in the US? I think is the question.
Okay, a lot of questions there. Well, as our producer, on our panel, Jean-Jacques, would you like to talk a little bit about the from a production perspective, what is Claret compared to a Rosé? And then, Christy and I, we can talk about the market and what's here.
Okay, so I'm not a Claret producer, but I have some information, some clues. So I know this market is quite dynamic, and all the Claret producers are doing very well. In the process, it's a Claret, so it's a little bit darker and fruitier. I mean, Claret is very interesting, but it's staying quite a niche production in Bordeaux, quite a nice value in the meantime for the consumer, but also for the producer, because sometimes with the regular simple rosé, not all the wine growers are making enough. We are not even talking about making money, but just paying the cost. So Claret is a very win-win production, because consumer love the style, and the producer is making a living with, which is also an issue. So as far as I know, it's a very dynamic little niche market working and growing well.
And I think it's a product we'd like to see more of here. And might I just add, in terms of the production, it's sort of defined by the density of color. So, in a sort of production regulations compared to a rosé, there would be a little bit more sort of specificity in terms of the amount of color that would need to be, extracted. So, it falls between a rosé and a light red, where you do have a nice little bit of tannin, that deeper color, but it's also much lighter than a regular red. And as a wine drinker, as a wine consumer myself, and someone who loves Claret, I would certainly love to see more of the wines here. There are a few, but I think they tend to be in, and Christy, I don't know what you're seeing out, but they tend to be in sort of key sort of urban cities, and not here all the time.
Yeah, I think a challenge for Claret is the deeper color. People aren't accustomed to that, and there's definitely an association that rosé is supposed to be super pale. I don't agree with that. Rosé can come in any color it wants to, and be wonderful and dry. But I think that it's fighting a little bit against that. So that's one of the reasons that we don't see much of it. And of course, not much of it is produced. But I look at Claret, and I love the fact that it really is the perfect wine between not even just white, but rosé and red. I often say, well, when you're to sommeliers that I'm training, or even servers that I'm training, it's like, if someone says white, someone says red, then rosé is a great way to go. And Claret is really like the perfect rosé to go to for that, because you do get the body, you get something that is still chilled, you get something with some texture, you get a little bit of tannin, as you mentioned, so it's not all that far from a red in that regard. And I think it's a perfect solution for all those times when you have people that kind of want different things, but you can kind of give it to them in a Claret, a rosé in general.
Yeah, and I think it segues into that sort of how we dine today, and yet it, it has a little bit of tannic grip for somebody who kind of would like a red wine. So again, I think all of this in terms of the market is about supply and demand. So we want to encourage more production of it, and then also hopefully incite and engage more of a demand from this side as well. So maybe any of you who are bringing in Bordeaux, maybe look for the Claret from the producers sort of the next time.
Yes, please.
Yeah. And we have a question about clones for the dry white wines, Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon. There's a question, are the clones being developed, or are the clones available that can hold their acidity better, if I presume the question is asked in the context of climate change?
So that's definitely for you, Jean-Jacques.
Yes.
That's a Jean-Jacques question.
So right now we have there is no new. I mean, as far as I know, there is no new clone specifically helping for a high acidity and low pH. I mean, nothing new that we already have, but the biggest effect in terms of global warming and lack of acidity and freshness is the place where we plant dry white. So of course, with the south exposure on very gravel and sandy places in a warm place, even with the best clone, with the biggest OGM, anyway, it won't work. So the clone don't has that a big impact than the choice of where we plant the vine. Mm-hmm. And during many time we were considering some cold places not really interesting for wine in general and even for white. And now even in my own estate, in some places with the north exposure, even a bit in the middle of the forest with some shadow in the morning, now we are considering this place to make a fresher white. So concerning the clone, we are more or less at the end of the way. I mean, with what we have available, because now when you want to plant 1 hectare of Sauvignon Blanc, you have to book your plant quite 12 months or 18 months before. So when you have the chance to book a good plant with a good rootstock, because before talking of the clone, we have to find the right rootstock adapted to clay, adapted to limestone, adapted to gravel. So what we feel is that we call the Sauvignon Gris or Sauvignon Rose is not that well adapted to global warming. It's not the fresher one. My father planted a lot of pink Sauvignon and grey Sauvignon in the 80s. He made some trip in the Napa Valley in Australia, and he bring back this idea. Now we quite quit all the pink and grey Sauvignon, at least in our estate. I'm not saying generally, but it doesn't seem the best adaptation to keep the freshness and acidity. Another aspect is the orientation of the vine. So in the past, we consider that planting north south was the best option in terms of maturity, because you directly get the light of the sun, which is arriving from the east. Now, and we just planted 1 hectare in Clos Floriden this year, we did exactly the reverse. So east-west, especially to avoid direct impact of the sun, and in a way to make the maturity a bit slower. So we change many things, and until now we feel that it has a biggest impact. Also, the date of harvest, and now we are harvesting Sauvignon Blanc to get it crispy in August. When I was a little boy 35 years ago, we were starting the harvest September 10. So there is many leverage until now, which has a biggest impact than the clone. But maybe one day we will find something. But until now, nothing really evident.
And Jean-Jacques teed up our next webinar, which will be all about the environment. So we don't have a date yet, but we'll be sure to share that. I'm just on to say our time is up. We went a little bit over, but thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to our panel. I wanted to let everyone know that there is a downloadable handout. Hopefully you saw it. It'll also be on the recorded version, but it will have tips, a summer calendar, talk about food pairings and how, keywords for each of the styles of wine. And Mary, any closing thoughts that you have?
Well, I'm going to make sure that I've got plenty of Bordeaux in my summer kit. I think I sometimes I feel we're just we're saying these wines are so suitable for the summer, and we all know that these wines are very affordable. But it's something that I think to consciously think about when you're going out to stock up for the summer, or in a retail, or organize your shelves, because the wines have fabulous deliciousness, fabulous affordability, and really there's so many diverse styles to suit every taste.
Well, thank you everyone. Thank you, Jean-Jacques, Christy, Wendy, Mary.
Thank you very much.
Give me the wine.
This has been another episode of Exploring the Wine Glass. Thanks for listening. If you have suggestions on what topics you would like me to discuss, please reach out on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as Exploring the Wine Glass. I am also on LinkedIn as Laurie Hoytbud. Of course, you can always email me at exploringthewineglass@gmail.com. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find me more easily. And most importantly, tell your wine-loving friends, because if you like the podcast, they will too. Music is Wine by Kevens. Until next week, Slainte.
Darkery, sweet Merlot, give me the